And our first presenter this morning is Madrangca from the University of Philippines at Cebu. Take it away, Heaven.
So, hello everyone. Good morning. I am Madrangca, an undergraduate student from the University of the Philippines, Cebu. In fact, I am presenting all the way from the Philippines. I am studying communication, majoring in integrated marketing communication, but my passion has always been in fandom studies and social media culture. And I am honored to present to you today my research that's titled An Exploratory Study on Participative Content Creation in the Dream SMP. So as a community, fandoms thrive not only through shared interests, but also through fanish activities. Fandoms take pieces of media and interact with it, interpret it, and create from it. So despite this constant interaction and production, fandoms are usually framed as separate entities from producers or creators. Even in their most productive form, in most cases, there are boundaries between producers and fans. So, however, with social media and especially with the popularity of live streaming, the interaction between fans and producers, or content creators in this case, becomes more consistent in real time. So suddenly, fans have an almost unprecedented access to their favorite media or creator. And at the same time, creators and producers can see and interact with these responses. So one such piece of media I find that demonstrates this very close-knit interaction is the Dream SMP, which is a multiplayer Minecraft server best known for its fictional drama and complex lore, told through mostly improvised performances in-game by its content creators. So it started back in April 2020 and reached its conclusion last April 2023. So on screen is an example of how a standard DSMP stream would go, with multiple content creators streaming simultaneously to thousands of viewers who interact with the stream real time. So aside from its storytelling aspects, it is well known for its popular fan content and the unique interpretations that come with it. So this clip is from the animator Sadist, who animated the scene you saw on the last slide. So this research was focused on how fans and how fan content can affect digital storytelling, and it also touches on what happens if producers and fans permeate the same online spaces and are constantly interacting with each other. So the heart, or the main question of this research, is what happens to a story when fans can instantly broadcast their inputs and fan creations? And what happens to producers if their storytelling process is constantly exposed to fan discourse? So what does it look like when creators and their fandoms are so heavily intertwined? I decided to investigate this through three objectives. So first, identify and describe canonical elements from the Dream SMP, which the fans are most engaged and interact with. Second, assess and examine fan-made content created within the Dream SMP fandom. And third, examine the canonical elements within the Dream SMP narrative that are influenced by fan-made content and fan discourse. So to really dig into this, one of the theoretical groundworks of this project is anchored on reader response criticism. So reader response criticism stems from reception theory and focuses on how audiences create meaning and interpret media with their own background, knowledge of narrative tropes, genres, and personal experiences. So in the Productive Fandom by Nicole Lamerix, two main processes of reader response criticism emerged, namely naturalization and experientiality. So naturalization is when, in the construction of textual meaning, readers rely on conventions that make the deviant familiar, and has the readers use their pre-existing knowledge and background to place the text in reality. I interpret this as asking the question, how do I ground this fictional media in my reality, based on my background? While experientiality is the quasi-mimetic evocation of real-life experiences and focuses on how readers generate genuine attachment and emotional reactions to characters. So experientiality focuses more on audience response and lets the readers empathize and even fully experience the events of the text. So it helps audiences and fans identify themselves with characters or situations and even relate to them. So these two elements are very interconnected and essential in the act of immersing oneself into specific medias. and in this case is Minecraft roleplay. Here are the rest of my theoretical framework. So another approach I took was Peircean semiotics. So it focuses on three interconnected elements with a triadic relationship. I wish I had a visual for this, but I didn't have time. So we have signs, objects, and interpretants. So this help in the creation and meaning. So this concept specifically outlines that there is an infinite semiosis in the meaning of signs. And this comes in when analyzing how the audiences interpret the story elements and how they are incorporated into the fan works and fan interpretation. I also utilized concepts from symbolic interactionism just to describe how fan interpretation and fan content integrated itself into the fandom's ecosystem. So how I studied this very complex fandom was through a multitude of interviews and very detailed focus group discussions. So here is an extensive list of all my respondents and their descriptions. So I specifically did a focus group discussion, or FGD, and in-depth interviews with fans who followed the DSMP since its inception. I also interviewed a lot of people who do fan-made content. I even got in contact with a DSMP streamer who was very active in the storytelling process from beginning to end. And the responses from these discussions also determined which fan content and canon elements I ended up analyzing descriptively using the theoretical framework I have established. So let's go through the results by going through each objectives. So the first objective, again, is to identify and describe canonical elements from the Dream SMP which fans are most engaged and interact with. So what made the DSMP so engaging, despite its very limited medium, which is Minecraft, were two things. One is the content creators and also the live streamed format. So the lines on the screen that you can see are direct quote from the participants of the FGD and interviews. So many of the respondents became interested in the DSMP through the content creators or streamers that they followed even before the series. So even interpersonal relationships between the streamers was something that bled into or out of the DSMP storyline. So I don't know if you guys were familiar with the DSMP, but there was this phenomenon where people would make duos or like trios out of characters. So that was something that was like pointed out by the content creators specifically. So in addition to this, the usage of face cam or a live feed of the content creator's face while playing the game, as you see here, helped in the immersion. So in a way, content creators are the audience's way of naturalizing Minecraft's graphics, which is very removed from reality. And it's the face cam, the established friendship, and even the personas that helped in grounding the stream's content and the general storyline. Also, the DSMP has a flair for being dramatic, and its content creator. It is the content creators, whether it's from their facial expression or their voice acting, or even like their Minecraft characters' body language, that help aid in the experientiality and the emotional factor of it. So, because Minecraft is not the most expressive medium, and if you take away the face cam or mute the stream that has none of that, it's really hard to grasp a story. But when you add these human elements, suddenly there are emotions, there's motivation, there is a story to follow. So the DSMP being live streamed and mostly improvised gives the audience a chance to participate. Of course, storytelling through Minecraft is nothing new. Several YouTube series predate the DSMP, but it was the opportunity to make a clear impact and to experience a moment in real time that made the DSMP so interesting to many viewers. So the FGD specifically points to two instances where audience input had a significant effect on the story's direction. First is the 2020 L'Manberg elections, and the second one is the exile arc. So the L'Manberg election was the story arc where four political parties of L'Manberg were vying for control for their newly freed nation. So after the debates and speeches took places, a Google form was released to the public, and it was up to the viewers to vote for their favorite party. And next one is the exile poll, which was another thing, taking place months after the election, wherein Tabo, who was the president of L'Manberg at that time, left Tommy Innett's fate to the fans through this Twitter poll after he committed several crimes. So the results of both polls combined with character decisions within the narrative were really consequential and kicked off major story beats. So for example, the election eventually the election eventually led to a rebellion from, the faction Pogtopia, and Tommy in its exile became one of the darker character storylines that the DSMP explored. So both of these events were cited by the FGD respondents as something exciting and immersive, and it made them feel like they were part of the story somehow. There was even like a point in the FGD where someone said that they felt like they were actually citizens of Lemanberg, which I think was the point. So next is we go to the next objective, which is to assess and examine fan-made content created within the Dream SMP fandom. So the respondents all reported that fan-made content was integral to fan engagement within the DSMP fandom. So this is in line with the discussions by Jenkins, Lamarix, Lanier and Fowler, and Mason, who all emphasized that fan production and interaction with each other and these fan contents are a defining feature of a fandom. So in fact, Mason specifically discusses how this is one of the aspects that really separates ordinary audiences from true dedicated fans. So it is not only the mere consumption of content that makes you a fan, but the willingness to interact with others and really partake in the community and its activities. So I think this is where the limitations of the DSMP became its biggest strength. Its limitations being that it's a bit visually limited. So Minecraft is a very limited medium, and as stated before, these limitations allow fans to ideate, to fill in the gaps. Where the DSMP falls short is where the fans passionately need it. So whether it's like the lack of visual nuances or like random throwaway lines or unresolved plot lines, because again, the DSMP, especially in the very beginning, it was mostly improvised. Fans swoop in and create their own reimaginings of events and character relationships. So this really relates to Sandvoss's discussion in his writing titled The Death of a Reader, wherein he expresses that the act of reading is the dialogue between text and reader, and meaning is created as readers inject their own experiences and ideas into textual gaps that the author cannot fill. So first, I want to talk about a classification of fan-made content within the community, which I called fan documentation. So fan documentations are accessible pieces of media, whether it's written or otherwise, because I also have seen video formats of these that document the events of the DSMP. So the FGD discussion pointed to two major sources that are helpful in archiving the events of the server, which are the DSMP wiki and the lore updates Twitter account. So fans take it upon themselves to record the events for future references, and both of these are purely fan-run and fan-moderated. So this demonstrates how the fan community collectively naturalizes the events by organizing it somehow. So this is especially true with the DSMP wiki. So the thing about the DSMP is that the passage of time isn't really clear like how it would be in traditional storytelling. And it's also very, very dense because, again, this is like hours and hours upon content. And because like it is also very character driven, and fans really want to organize it for it to really make sense in a chronological manner. So the fan-made timeline of the DSMP is specifically very interesting to me because active members of the wiki are the ones who are organizing this through forums or Discord discussions. So the way they do this is they label groups or events thematically, and they divide it into the different arcs and eras, and they even include general description of the events. So according to the wiki staff that I interviewed, so this timeline, along with the contents of the website, are a combination of fan consensus, statements from content creators, and just general moderation from the staff. And then we move on to the most well-known form of fan-made content within the DSMP fandom, which I termed as creative interpretation, which is just content that is very creative. So in my research, creative interpretation extends to fan fiction and fan-made songs because they were mentioned during the focus group discussions. But what I found is that fan art and fan animation or animatic were the most impactful because They were just very visual and very easy to consume. And that is what I will be mainly discussing. So for fan art, this is where the principles of Peircean semiotics come in. So in this fandom, there is a unique phenomenon wherein characters often have multiple designs attached to it, and all are kind of accepted to a certain degree by the audiences. So for example, here, Technoblade, the pig character has one of the most varied character designs in the fandom, and it really differs from artist to artist. You know, sometimes he's not even a pig at all. He's just straight up interpreted as a human. And yet he's still recognizable because he retains the color palette from his in-game appearance. So this is also true with Nikki Niachu, whose creative interpretations are either based off of her Minecraft skin or her in-game appearance or her real-life appearance because she uses a face cam. It's also worth noting that the variations of her character design, I think, mostly stems off of her like changing hair colors throughout the DSMP like timeline. And yeah, so this is because Minecraft's in-game graphics are very simplistic and quite removed from reality. So visual creative works can become an anchor of naturalization for many fans. However, the character designs of the DSMP are subjected to the artist's own background and experientiality, creating more signs that fans associate with that character. So this is especially true when I interviewed one of the artists that does like the fan art. They really specifically use their own narrative knowledge or tropes to inject it into their designs. So we move on to fan animations, which are similar to fan art with naturalizations, only that fan animations focuses on the dramatization of events. So in this case, the artist takes more creative liberty to add more to a canon scene and to make the event appear more grounded in reality. Usually this is done by making characters appear more human, or if they are in block form, they exhibit more human-like animations to them. So the character then expresses more emotions and more actions visually, aiding to the naturalization of the events for the audiences. So this is another Sadist animation who the FGD and interviewees often cite as a really important fan creator to the community. So many fan animations or animatics, they condense the events from the canon into more cohesive scenes, and they use and edit the actual audio from the live streams. So in particular, Sadist's style is very unique because she doesn't actually animate just one specific scene. They use audios and events from different streams, and they combine them to create a trailer-like video that condenses the events of that particular arc. So we move on to the last objective, where I examine the canonical elements within the Dream SMP narratives that are influenced by content, fan-made content rather, and fan discourse. So the interview with the DSMP streamer, who is labeled here as Key Informant A or KIIA, revealed that they and other members get ideas from the fandom through seeing social media posts. In fact, the streamer themselves have admitted that they have directly asked a fan for help in writing a specific storyline. FGD participants also revealed that fan-made content within the DSMP helped its growth, and they also observed that it changed the overall tone of the storyline. So the FGD participants, most of which have been following DSMP streams since the beginning, noted that when fan content started becoming more common, and especially when Sadist's animation were garnering millions of views, the DSMP went from a lighthearted, casual, improvised server to something with actual plot and serious storylines. So it got to a point where streamers would actually reference Sadists on stream, especially during the earlier days. And they also reference other fan artists in general and how they would create content from the moment that they just acted. So let us now tackle what are the canon elements that were actually affected by fan-made content. So the FGD respondents cited 9 specific instances of fan content, 9 specific instances of fan content that have directly affected and influenced the storyline of the DSMP. So first one is the 3 life system, which affected the mechanic of the story. So this originated as a Reddit post and a fan theory about how characters only have 3 lives, and has since fundamentally changed how the DSMP handled death and how future storylines and stakes played out. So before, deaths didn't really mean anything because players just respawned. But because of this new rule, death suddenly meant more and drove a lot of the plot in the story. So 2 of the elements are new canon characters, which are Kristen, the goddess of death, and also the Endermoms. So Kristen is based off of the real-life wife of Filza, a prominent DSMP member, who became Filza's canon wife within the story. And Endermoms are OC by the user Buni, who are the mothers to Ranbu. However, I will say that these characters have appeared and became canon in the last third of the DSMP, which means that they didn't really affect future plot lines, but they do add more to the world building. 6 of the elements were interpretations of characters and their traits, so which makes a lot of sense, considering how fan art is very dominant in the DSMP. So these changes sometimes are not visually observed in the DSMP due to the limitations of Minecraft. I guess an exception to this is Quackity and Wilbur, who actually integrated these changes into their Minecraft skins. But these changes permeate future content made by fans. So an example of this is AIMZ's disability and their usage of walking sticks. So what happened was, in a stream, AIMZ lost their first canon life after a fall, and fan artists started portraying the character with a walking stick. So the content creator declared this canon through a tweet, but again, this is not reflected in the actual server as far as I know, like visually at least. However, this did determine how AMC will be interpreted by fan artists and fan fiction writers, which is with their walking sticks. So even the Endermoms, which again was not shown in game, but was declared canon through writing by Ranbu, fan creators now will create content featuring these characters, which reinforces their place in canon. This supports the fact that fan-made content is an integral part of how the DSMP canon is consumed by fans. So this is where symbolic interactionism comes to play. So symbolic interactionism relies on constant and repeated interaction in the creation of meaning and solidifying that meaning. So most of these elements are continuously circulated through discussions, fan arts, fan animation, etc. So they get repeated enough to the point where content creators take notice of these elements and sometimes integrate them into the story. But even with non-canonical content, as discussed here, like for example, the fan character designs, they circulate within the fandom so much that despite their variations, they are eventually accepted by the fans, not really as canon, but something that they could make sense of and could latch onto. So overall, fan-made content does have a profound impact on the DSMP, not only to its content creators, but also to the fans and audiences. Fans and content creators are both deeply intertwined in the process of storytelling within the DSMP. So in conclusion, the real-time interaction brought about by social media and live stream has shaped the DSMP and its storytelling. Fans find the content creators and the chance to participate in the DSMP very appealing. So the Dream SMP fandom creates fan-made content to naturalize story elements, and fan-made content affects how audiences perceive the characters and events. And some fan-made content does affect the canon storytelling directly or indirectly. So the level of participation within the DSMP community holds a lot of implication for participative fandoms. So we can even see this as a model for how fandoms in the future could possibly operate. You know, like we see this in, if you're following some of the DSMP members, we see this in, for example, Generation Lost, which has a lot of audience participation into it. So this opens up a lot of discussion because of the way it blurs producers and fan content creators. I think more studies on participative fandoms should be conducted because I think that a lot of fandoms are going to this direction. So this could also signal a democratization of the storytelling process through the internet and across different mediums, which I think has an implication on intellectual ownership. This especially applies to, you know, fan-made designs, like who really owns it? Is it the content creator who originated this, or is it the fan artist? But that is for future researchers to worry about. And this is where I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm Heaven Madrangca, and thank you so much for having me.